In the American West of the 1860s and 1870s, towns appear faster than systems can sustain them. A rail line cuts through open land, or a vein of silver is struck, and within months a settlement rises where nothing stood before. By 1870, places like Dodge City and Deadwood swell with thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, drawn by cattle, gold, or the promise of both. But infrastructure does not follow at the same speed. There are no sewers beneath these streets, no piped water, no organized removal of waste. If you enjoy learning about history, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and share it with your friends. In the comments, let me know where you're listening from. I would love to hear from you. This narrative is grounded in documented historical sources, including primary records and academic research, some of which you can see on your screen now. Behind the buildings, wooden privies lean at uneven angles, their pits dug shallow in hard ground. In heavy use, they fill quickly. When they overflow or collapse, their contents seep outward into the soil, carried by rain when it comes, or by the slow migration of insects when it does not. Flies move freely between waste and food, between wounds and mouths, stitching the town together in unseen ways. Inside the saloons, the air is thick and shared. Men gather shoulder to shoulder, their clothes stiff with days, sometimes weeks, of accumulated sweat. Bathing is rare, not from neglect, but from scarcity. Water must be hauled, often from distant sources, and it is used first for drinking, then for animals, then for cooking. What remains, if anything, is for washing. In many towns, a full bath costs money most cannot spare. A single tin tub might serve an entire boarding house, its water growing steadily darker with each use. Cleanliness becomes a luxury measured in coins. Clothing absorbs what the body releases. Shirts are worn until they harden with salt and dust. Underlayers, if they exist, are changed infrequently. In mining camps, where men work deep underground, the air itself becomes part of the problem. Damp, confined, and thick with particulates, it clings to skin and lungs alike. When workers emerge, they bring that environment with them, carried on their bodies back into crowded living quarters, where ventilation is minimal and space is shared. The system begins to close in on itself. Animals move through the same streets as people. Horses, mules, and cattle leave behind a constant trail that is never fully cleared. In larger cattle towns, thousands of animals pass through in a season. Their waste mixes with mud when it rains, and with dust when it does not, forming a shifting surface that is both unstable and contaminated. Wagons grind it down further. Children play near it. Food vendors set up beside it. Nothing is separated. Water sources, when they exist, are vulnerable. Wells are dug quickly, often without knowledge of what lies beneath. In some cases, they sit dangerously close to privies or refuse pits. Contamination seeps downward, invisible and gradual. A clear bucket drawn from a well may carry more than it reveals. In the absence of testing, there is only trust and necessity. Disease does not arrive as an external threat. It grows from within. Dysentery, cholera, and typhoid fever move quietly through these towns, carried by water and contact. Symptoms begin subtly: a fever, a weakness, then, in many cases, a rapid decline. In places where medical care is limited or non-existent, recovery depends less on treatment and more on chance. A doctor, if present, may serve thousands. Supplies are inconsistent. Knowledge is uneven. The body becomes the battleground, and often it loses. Yet daily life continues. The system does not pause to correct itself. Barber shops offer shaves with straight razors that are wiped but not sterilized between customers. Small cuts are common. Infection is a risk that few can afford to consider. In makeshift bathhouses, water is reused across multiple patrons, its warmth masking its contamination. Laundries operate under similar constraints, washing clothes in shared basins where dirt is diluted but not eliminated. Each attempt at cleanliness carries its own compromise. Women, fewer in number but central to the structure of these towns, manage what order they can. In boarding houses and homes, efforts are made to maintain some level of hygiene. Floors are swept, bedding is aired when possible. But resources remain limited, and the external environment presses inward constantly. Dust returns within hours. Flies are persistent. Water remains scarce. Control is partial and temporary. There is an unspoken understanding that the environment cannot be fully mastered. Survival depends on endurance more than correction. People adapt their expectations accordingly. The smell of unwashed bodies, of animals, of waste becomes part of the sensory background, no longer remarked upon. It is only when something shifts, when illness spreads more rapidly than usual, or when death begins to cluster, that attention sharpens. By then, the system is already under strain. Summer intensifies everything. Heat accelerates decay. Water sources shrink or stagnate. The concentration of people and animals increases as cattle drives converge on key towns. With them come more bodies, more waste, more pressure on already fragile systems. The balance, never stable to begin with, begins to tilt. A town can absorb only so much before it begins to show. It appears first in the small details. More frequent illness, longer recoveries, a lingering weakness among those who continue working because they must, then in the spaces between buildings where waste accumulates faster than it disperses, then in the water where clarity no longer guarantees safety. The pattern is forming, even if no one yet names it. The man behind the saloon finishes with his tin cup. The water is gone. The dust remains, clinging to damp skin, settling back into place as if nothing had changed. He dresses again, pulling on a shirt that carries the memory of every previous day. He steps back into the street. The town continues. The first deaths do not arrive with spectacle. They come quietly, folded into the ordinary rhythm of the town. A man who does not rise from his bunk, a child whose fever does not break, a woman who weakens over days, then hours, then is gone before morning light settles across the street. There is no announcement, no clear beginning, only a pattern that begins to repeat. At first, it is dismissed. Illness is expected here. The body is under constant strain, and death is never far. But as the days pass, the intervals shorten. The spaces between cases begin to close. Something is moving through the town. Water, once taken without question, becomes suspect, though no one can say precisely why. Wells that served without incident now seem to precede sickness. A bucket drawn at dawn may lead to fever by nightfall. Yet there are no alternatives. Distance makes new sources impractical, and hauling water from afar consumes time few can spare. So the same water is drawn again. Inside cramped rooms, bodies lie in proximity. Boarding houses, already dense with occupants, become sites of quiet transmission. One cough becomes another. One fever mirrors the next. Bedding is shared or reused. Air circulates slowly, thick with heat and breath. There is no isolation, no space to separate the sick from the well. The system tightens. Physicians, where they exist, begin to notice the change. Their tools are limited. Their understanding, shaped by a mixture of emerging science and inherited belief, offers no single explanation. Some suspect miasma, the foul air rising from the streets and alleys. Others look to water, though the connection remains uncertain, unproven in the absence of controlled knowledge. They treat symptoms, not causes. Laudanum is administered for pain. Calomel, a mercury compound, is given in measured doses, sometimes worsening the condition it is meant to ease. Hydration is attempted, but water itself may carry the threat. Each intervention is a calculation made under pressure with outcomes that cannot be predicted. The body remains the final measure. As illness spreads, labor falters. In mining towns, fewer men descend into shafts. Output slows. In cattle towns, drovers arrive to find fewer hands available to manage herds. Economic activity, already volatile, begins to stutter. The system that drew people here, that promised rapid gain, now reveals its dependence on fragile human continuity. When the body fails, the system follows. Fear does not erupt all at once. It seeps in, carried by observation rather than proclamation. People begin to notice who is missing. Chairs left empty, doors that remain closed, conversations that lower in volume when certain names are mentioned. The awareness spreads, even as language struggles to contain it. No one can leave easily. The same forces that brought people here now hold them in place. Work is tied to location. Opportunity is fixed in the ground, in the rail line, in the flow of cattle. To abandon it is to risk everything. So most remain, navigating a landscape that has become quietly hostile. Adaptation begins in small ways. Some boil water when they can, though fuel is limited and the practice is not yet universal. Others avoid certain wells, relying instead on those believed to be safer, though evidence is thin. Food is handled with more caution in some households, less in others. There is no coordinated response, no authority capable of imposing order across the town. Each person adjusts alone. The environment continues to compound the crisis. Heat accelerates the decomposition of waste in alleys and behind buildings. Flies multiply, their numbers swelling in direct proportion to the decay they feed upon. They move without barrier, touching waste, then food, then skin, creating a network of contact that no one can see but everyone begins to feel. The town becomes a closed circuit. Funerals increase, though they remain restrained. There is little time for ceremony. Graves are dug quickly, often on the edges of town where the ground is least resistant. In some places, burials occur within hours of death, driven by necessity rather than ritual. The soil itself becomes part of the system, receiving what the town cannot sustain. Loss becomes routine. Yet even under pressure, behavior does not transform uniformly. Saloons remain open. Cards are played. Whiskey is poured. For many, the continuation of routine is not denial, but defiance. To stop is to acknowledge a force that cannot be controlled. So the doors swing, the glasses are filled, and life persists in the shadow of what is unfolding. The system resists its own collapse. But resistance has limits. In certain pockets of the town, illness clusters more tightly. A particular boarding house, a row of tents near the edge of a mining camp, a section of street where drainage is poorest and waste accumulates most heavily. These areas become centers of intensified transmission, though no formal map records them. Patterns emerge without being named. Authorities, where they exist, begin to respond in fragmented ways. A town council may order the clearing of certain refuse piles. A well may be closed, its water deemed unsafe by observation alone. In rare cases, rudimentary quarantines are attempted, isolating individuals or households. But enforcement is inconsistent, and compliance varies. Order is attempted, but not secured. The underlying problem remains unresolved. There is no comprehensive system for waste removal. No infrastructure to separate clean water from contamination. No unified understanding of disease transmission that could guide effective action. Each measure addresses a fragment, while the whole continues to operate under strain. The pressure does not release. As weeks pass, the cumulative effect becomes visible. The town slows, not in a single moment, but in a gradual reduction of motion. Fewer voices in the street, less traffic at certain hours, a subtle thinning of presence that changes the atmosphere without altering the physical structure. The buildings remain, The people do not. And still, new arrivals come. Drawn by the same forces that built the town, they enter a system already under duress. They drink the same water, walk the same streets, breathe the same air. The cycle extends, incorporating them without pause. The frontier does not wait for stability. It expands, even as it strains. By late summer, the balance is no longer holding. What began as scattered illness has become sustained pressure. The town has adapted where it can, endured where it must, but the underlying conditions remain unchanged. The system has not corrected itself. It has only absorbed the damage. And now, the limits are approaching. By early autumn, the town no longer pretends. What was once endured in silence now shapes behavior in the open. Doors remain closed longer. Movement becomes deliberate. The casual proximity that defined daily life begins to fracture, not by decree but by instinct. People create distance where none existed before, carving space out of structures never designed to allow it. The system is changing, not by design, but by pressure. Some wells are abandoned entirely. Their water, once central, is now avoided with a quiet certainty that needs no formal explanation. New sources are sought, even if they lie farther from the center of town. Buckets are carried over greater distances. Time is exchanged for a measure of safety that cannot be guaranteed, only hoped for. Water, once taken, becomes chosen. Waste, long ignored, begins to draw attention. Not everywhere, and not consistently, but enough to alter patterns. In certain streets, refuse is moved farther from living spaces. Pits are dug deeper. In some towns, informal crews emerge, paid or otherwise, tasked with clearing what has accumulated. Their work is incomplete, often temporary, but it introduces a new idea, that the environment can be shaped, if only slightly. Bathing, once rare, becomes more intentional among those who can afford it. Bath houses, where they exist, see increased use, though their conditions remain imperfect. Water is still reused, still limited, but the act itself takes on a different weight. It is no longer only about comfort. It becomes, in part, a response to what has been witnessed, a small assertion against the unseen. Medical practice shifts in parallel, though without uniform direction. Some physicians begin to favor boiling water, urging patients to do the same. Others emphasize cleanliness of wounds, a practice inconsistently followed but increasingly recognized. These changes are not codified. They spread through observation, through anecdote, through the slow exchange of experience in a place where certainty is rare. Knowledge moves without structure. The town council, or its equivalent, becomes more active. Ordinances appear, limited in scope but significant in intent. The placement of privies is regulated in some areas, required to be set at greater distances from wells. Certain forms of waste disposal are discouraged, if not entirely prevented. Enforcement remains uneven, but the presence of rules marks a shift, from reaction toward intention. Economically, the town adjusts, labor returns, but with caution. Work resumes in mines and along cattle routes. Yet the memory of recent loss lingers in the pace and in the choices people make. Some leave, quietly, taking their chances elsewhere. Others stay, bound by investment, by necessity, or by the belief that the worst has passed. The system stabilizes, but not as it was. Social life contracts and reforms. Saloons remain, but their density fluctuates. Boarding houses alter their arrangements where possible, reducing shared bedding, increasing ventilation, however slight. These changes are partial, constrained by resources, but they represent a movement away from what once seemed fixed. Custom begins to shift. The dead are no longer anomalies within the system. They have been absorbed into its memory. Graves at the edge of town mark the period not as a single event, but as a sustained condition. Those who remain carry that knowledge forward, not as theory, but as lived experience. The cost has been recorded in bodies. By the time winter approaches, the immediate pressure begins to ease. Cooler temperatures slow the processes that once accelerated decay. Water sources, though still imperfect, feel less volatile. The visible signs of crisis diminish, though the underlying structure remains fragile. Relief arrives, but not resolution. What has changed is not the environment alone, but the relationship between people and it. There is a growing awareness, still incomplete, that proximity carries consequence, that water is not neutral, that waste does not disappear when ignored. These ideas do not transform the town overnight, but they take hold in practice, shaping decisions in ways both small and cumulative. A different system begins to emerge. It is not clean, it is not fully understood, but it is altered. The frontier town endures, as it was always intended to, through adaptation rather than perfection. Its structures remain rough, its resources limited, its knowledge uneven. Yet within these constraints, a shift has occurred. Not a complete break, but a reorientation. The world has narrowed, then adjusted. What survives is a version of the town that has learned, through pressure, the cost of its own design. It continues forward, carrying both its flaws and its changes, shaped by a period that did not announce itself, but left its mark in every altered habit, every cautious choice. The street still fills with dust. The wells still draw water from uncertain ground. The buildings still lean under the same sun. But the way people move within this space has changed. The world did not end, but it did not remain the same. What was built here would shape everything that followed.